Community Insight podcast, where we share insights from community experts to stay up to date in Microsoft. I'm Nicholas, and I'll be your host today. In this episode, we will dive into Azure cloud architecture for high availability and low latency. That's a long one. And before we get started, I want to remind you to follow us on social media so you help us, so you never miss an episode. So you help us reach more amazing people like yourselves. In today, we have a special guest called Florian Lenz. Can you please introduce yourself, please?
Sure. Thanks. I'm Florian. I'm working as a solution architect, as a freelance consultant. I help my clients to make their cloud architecture better and more stable. And so this is why, as well, this topic of cloud architecture for high availability and low latency came in place. And today I want to talk with you about this topic. And let's see how we go further.
Okay. So as a freelancer, what kind of like projects you've been involved with for your clients?
Well, it's various projects, so it depends highly on the customer. But at the end, as I told, I'm working as a Azure consultant, so it's basically always any relation to Azure. One project is, for example, currently creating an Azure landing zone for a customer, or they already created this landing zone concept, and now my part is to bring some subscriptions into the landing zone, help them to architect the whole subscription and the resources. And other projects are some more or some less architecting and more programming. So I started as a programmer a lot years ago, and now I'm more architecting but still programming. And in such a projects, I work as well as a programmer, and then just doing programming stuff.
Yeah. Is it just yourself in that project? So do you have
It
any
depends.
colleagues and stuff if it's a bigger project?
Yeah, it depends. I was on one project. It was only myself. It was quite okay, but at the end, it's a little bit lonely when you work
Yeah.
all day long only for yourself. And maybe there's a project manager where you give some information and that's it. And most of the time, I'm working in projects with multiple people. But honestly, I'm as an external one. I don't work in the company, but I work with people from the company, and helping these people to get the best out of it.
Yeah, it's similar like a contractor, really. You're not
Yeah,
officially employed, but you're employed by them, the, the client. So
exactly. Yeah.
in today's theme, we're discussing high availability and low latency. So can you give us some use cases that in your project that you've worked on that have a high availability?
Yeah. I mean, basically, high availability is, or at least in Azure, there are multiple concepts of high availability. I mean, there
Yeah,
is for sure the high availability everyone knows of, the gear redundancy, globally high availability. So basically, um, before all the cloud stuff, when you have a on-premise server and you run it in, for example, you in UK or me in Germany,
yeah,
then it's for sure when this server is not running anymore, we have a problem because then our solution is not working. And then with Gero redundancy, we can just add one server to our server farm, for example, in the USA. And then we have some kind of high availability. So that means when, for example, in Germany, my server goes down, there is still a replication off in the USA. So everything is working fine, more or less. But then the traffic goes to the USA instead of Germany. And this is it. But in Azure, we have not only this gear redundancy, we have as well zone redundancy and local redundancy. And this means, for example, that in Azure, we have, when you have some, for example, a storage account, you can choose local redundancy, zone redundancy, and gear redundancy. I just don't talk about read-only access, but these three we have. And basically, gear redundancy, as I told, it's globally replicated. Then we have zone redundancy, which means when I select, for example, West Europe, I guess West Europe, the region is in the Netherlands, Amsterdam region. Then this means that in this region there are multiple data centers from Azure, and these resource is replicated through these centers, which means when one center, for example, has a outage or something else, there are two other centers which are still running, hopefully, and then it's regional, redundant. And then it's local redundancy, which means there is only one data center, and inside these data center, I have multiple instances. I guess it's all the time 3. And yeah, basically, this is one server rack, and when one server rack goes down, then there are 2 other ones. But when the whole data center goes down because of an outage, for example, then with local redundancy, I don't have any running instances.
Okay. Is there any particular resources that you would recommend, like to do load redundancy? Because I know you can do like app gateway, traffic manager, or if you have like scale.
Yeah, I mean, this depends on your needs. There is a quite good description on Microsoft Learn. But basically, when you have a website, for example, for low latency, you can use Azure Front Door. So it's a content delivery network. And basically, by using this, you have all the advantages of a content delivery network. It's quite fast. And yeah, when you work with Azure, I mean, it's quite easy to use Azure Front Door.
Okay. So which one do you use often to replicate, like whether it's like if it were like a VM, like a architecture, which one would you recommend to use for high availability?
Yeah, I mean, at the end, I mean, there are 4. It's Azure Front Door, Azure App Gateway, API gateway. I don't know. There are 4 instances you can use, and basically, it highly depends on your requirements. So basically, most of the time, I'm using Azure Front Door. This is on the one hand, it's because it's an content delivery network, and for websites, which is most of the time what I develop or what is in my infrastructure, this is more or less the best solution. And furthermore, in Azure Front Door, you have the web application firewall, so you have some basic security, SQL injection, or to check if there is SQL injection in your requests, and this is basically out of the box from Azure Front Door, which is when I have a web application, most of the time I'm using Azure Front Door when it's global redundancy. Yeah.
Okay, so that's it. I'm curious to know, since it has a freelance, do you use infrastructure as code like Bicep, Terraform
Yeah, sure.
to create your like architecture?
Yeah. I was in a project and I really like it that there was a project manager and he told all the time, we want to automate everything and we don't want to do anything manually, because otherwise you do it, for example, in the development environment, and then after some time you don't know what did you do, why is production not working, whatever. And so we started with infrastructure as code. And for me, most of the time, it's either ARM templates or Bicep. Depends a little on what I'm doing. But Terraform, honestly, I don't really work with Terraform. For me, there's some kind of abstraction I do not really like, because at the end, I'm an Azure architect. I work in Azure. I don't want to go to Google Cloud Platform or AWS, for example. So for me, Terraform, the advantages of Terraform are not that big, and the disadvantages are quite bigger. So I do not use it.
Yeah, otherwise you could go into like Bicep because they're fully Microsoft itself. So what are, aside from, I know monitoring play a key aspect of high availability, what other metrics or you use to monitor high availability and low latency?
Basically, as well, it highly depends. But for example, what I know is when you have high availability, or at least you want to have a high available system, you have always the problem that there's a requirement that there is no downtime. allowed, I would say. So you have SLA, for example, that 99.99% you guarantee that your software is working, for example, and then you want to have high availability in your system. And when you want to have this, you need to have a look to, for example, Azure resources, and have a look as well to the SLAs from Microsoft. So, for example, Cosmos DB, I think it's 99.999%. No, it's 4 nines, so 99.99%. And when you want 5 nines, for example, you need to go to a higher available solution or use a different SKU. So basically, this is one metric, for example, that when you have some kind of service level agreement, that you need to check the agreements from Microsoft or other resources you are using.
Okay. Yeah. So because I think I myself use like just built-in Azure Monitor metrics to monitor like the resource, whether it's Traffic Manager, App Gateway, and just create some like alerts needed. Yeah. I think before you mentioned you got some slides, Marissa, you want
I
to
have some
present?
slides.
Or
I have some slides to show
we
you.
could show it if you want. Yeah, because we got quite a few viewers.
Yeah, give me a second.
I see you got Cloud Light in your background.
I have. Yeah, there's a lightning inside the cloud, so it's all honestly it should be some
Lightning.
kind of Azure serverless because
It's probably like a function. Yeah, it's like a function.
exactly. This is the idea.
Function in the cloud.
So present.
If you share your screen, I can just put it up in this screen here.
Yeah, I share my screen.
Yeah.
Perfect. Yeah. So basically, exactly. One interesting fact I found in the internet is from Google. And Google found out some years ago that when your loading time increases, that as well your bounce rate is increasing. And from 0 to 1 second, for example, it's not really measurable that there is a bounce rate. So for sure, when we have, for example, 900 milliseconds loading time, it's not as good as when you have, for example, 300, but up to 1 second, it's more or less okay. But from 1 to 3 seconds, it's on as well. It's already increasing, and it's highly increasing when you have a loading time more than 3 seconds. Because when you have more than these.
Sorry, what's bounce rate? So.
Okay, bounce rate is the number of people who leave the site when you go to the site. It's loading 1 second, 2 seconds. Okay, it takes too much seconds. I close it. I don't care about it. It's too long. So this is a bounce rate. And for example, when you have, I don't know, in general, you have 3 people who leave the page because it's too slow. When the load time is up to, it's 1 to 3 seconds, then the bounce rate increases by 32%, which means when in general you have, for example, 3 people going back from your site when it's too slow, then when it's more than 1 second and up to 3 seconds, it's not 3, it's 4. And when you have, for example, now 100 or 300 people leaving your page, then it's 100,000 people more, only because your page is too slow. And this could be one thing when you have, for example, this is not directly something with high availability, but something with low latency we go maybe afterwards as well. But this is some interesting page, I think, and some information I got from Google, which is quite impressive, I guess. For example, as well, when you have a web shop, for example, where you get money from. So it's a different idea when you have, I don't know, just a web page to show some information, or a blog, for example. It's not nice, but it's okay, I guess. But when it's a page like Amazon, this is money which you lose because only you have a slow web page. And as I already told Amazon, for Amazon, we have, for example, the following. I got the information I guess 3 weeks ago. This numbers are from 2014, and I guess 2018 or 19 there are newer numbers, which means that Amazon goes down and loses $66,000 per minute. And I guess they were down half an hour, which means they lost more or less $5 million or something around. Which is a quite high number for sure. And here we come to the topic of high availability, because at the end, Amazon is a web page where you can go shopping and buy stuff. You pay more or less on Amazon.com. And when the page is not available, you or Amazon lose money. And here's the same like with low latency. When you have a blog, maybe high availability is nice, but not really, it's not really recommended. Or maybe the advantages of high availability is not really for you when you have a blog, but when you get money from your website, maybe it's more required solution. You want to have that. You have high availability. So basically, these are two facts I found, which I think, based on the requirements and the solution you want to create, high availability and low latency could be something for you. And basically, when we have a look, what does it mean? Low latency. Low latency means we have, for example, as I told you at the beginning, we have, for example, a web page. It doesn't matter if it's hosted in an app service plan, in a VM. However, when there is a server in Germany, for example, and a customer from the USA talks to my page I have hosted in Germany, then there is around 200 to 300 milliseconds of latency, just because the whole traffic needs to go from the USA under the Atlantic Ocean to Germany and back. And this is 200 to 300 milliseconds we just lose because there is no server close to our customer. As well, a blog, not a problem. Amazon, for example, should create instances quite near to their customers. Because at the end, bounce rate as well, 300 milliseconds, then you only have 700 left. When you have a server close to the customer, maybe there's a latency of 50, maybe 100 milliseconds, then you have a little bit more time to load the data. So, for high availability, we have, for example, the following. You have, as I told as well in the beginning, we have multiple instances around the world. And what happened now when a customer from the USA wants to go to our website, then he wants to go to the website. The website is not available, so he will get data from the instance from Germany, for example. Then for sure we have the problem of higher latency, but at the end, maybe it's better to have a higher latency but still get data, instead of having low latency, and when this low latency server is not available, we just don't get any data. So maybe, or we have this wonderful world where everything's working with high availability, so available system, and low latency because servers near to the customer. And in the not so nice world, we have not available system, but then a higher latency, but we still have data.
Yes. Sorry. So what happens if you have like one zone and one data center near you, and you can't go elsewhere because data sovereignty? If you're like a public sector, what option would you choose? Would you choose like backup and stuff with scaling, or because you can still use high availability and just like between two other resources in one zone anyway.
So in one zone, basically this one zone is spent, I don't have the correct numbers, but some 100 kilometers, I would say. So it's quite near to the other center. So this is not a problem. I guess the bigger problem is really when you have data centers around the world, then it's maybe a bigger problem.
Okay. And these are all the These are all the data center that you worked on, or that
No, this
have the
is
availability into
no, this is
you?
just a picture. I wrote some data centers. No, at the end, most of the time, as well, it's highly depend on the requirements. For example, when you create a solution and you have some numbers from your company, and the company say, hey, we have 50% of our customers live in USA, 20% live in Europe, I don't know, 30% in Australia. Maybe it's, yeah, based on these numbers, you can create your
Yeah,
solution. And honestly, then you don't need to have a solution in South America, for example. But for sure, you can as well add these regions, for example, as a backup, because maybe when you add in Mexico one data center, maybe it's not called very often because in best case all the US instances are working, but when the US instances are not working, maybe the Mexico instance is working, and then you have the backup to Mexico, which is, I guess, quite nearer than Europe. So this is not a problem then to have the lower latency from Mexico. This could be a solution, but here, yeah, at the end it depends on the requirements and the numbers from your company. Yeah.
yeah. Even if it's like financial company like trading, they want it to like zero latency, 0 point something. So that when you have can only do it like whether it's through on-prem because they want their own data. So it
Mhm.
depends on the client itself, really.
Yeah. Yeah, basically I have some. Yeah, now we can go to the serverless topic, but I guess this is not a good idea. uh, maybe some other time. But yeah, at the end, the talk is it's a presentation I held on conferences, and in this talk I go further into the topic of why serverless could be a good solution for such a high available, global redundant, high availability system, because of the, yeah, payments you need to pay. So the cost of your solution when you
Yeah.
have VMs, it's, yeah, basically no matter how much traffic there's on the virtual machine, you need to pay for it. In serverless, you pay only for the request. And I take some numbers and ideas, and yeah, I guess it's a quite good presentation. But I guess for today it's quite too long. Yeah.
So would you recommend serverless instead of like PaaS service instead of like a VM itself? Because VM is just like on-premise, it costs quite a lot. So you need people can have an option to move serverless or a PaaS, like using app service, container apps or so.
Mhm. Yeah, for me, for example, I mean, I'm a serverless enthusiast, I would say. So I really like using serverless. I have a YouTube channel about serverless, and for me, it's a quite nice and good solution.
Yeah.
But as well, here the requirements are highly dependent. So when you have, for example, or the advantage of serverless, you pay only for the requests you do. So in best case, one request, or I guess 1 million requests costs you $4. And I don't know, best case with 1 million requests, you get $10. So you make a profit. In such a case, it's not a problem. As well, when you have, when the load on your system is not predictable. In such a case as well, serverless could be a better solution because of the automatic scalability. You don't need to have a look to the infrastructure, etc. You can just focus on, yeah, programming, doing your job, and that's it. There are some advantages, but honestly, there are as well disadvantages. And for example, one disadvantage when you have a look to serverless, for example, we have the Azure function, you host it, you can host it all around the world in every region, and it costs you exactly the same as, or every request costs the exact same when you have it only in one region or in 100 regions, for example. So this is quite nice. But on the other hand, you need a Cosmos DB. The Cosmos DB needs to be globally replicated. Maybe you need as well multiple write regions, because otherwise you have the latency later on in the database. And these are some disadvantages you need to have in mind, because, for example, with a VM, you have the disadvantage of it's not so scalable. You pay before, or you pay a fixed number. But in a VM, for example, you can host your application, you can host the database, and you don't have any problems, or smaller problems basically, with having as well a database instance.
Yeah.
for sure, then you need maybe some logic to replicate all the data. But at the end, you have you have the advantage and the disadvantage of take care of the whole infrastructure with all the pros and cons.
Yeah.
But basically,
Plus, serverless is quite cheaper in compared to cost compared to VM itself.
yeah,
It would save you quite a lot of money as well. So I would advise
yeah.
that. Would how would companies optimize optimize cost for high availability? So how would people scale it? Like you mentioned serverless and so well, Cosmos DB you just mentioned as well. Is there is if someone wanted to do like FinOps in high scale, high availability like architecture, how would someone optimize costs as low as possible?
Yeah, at the beginning, what I always see as a consultant when I go to a new project, most of the cases there's first of all over provisioning. So you have, for example,
Yeah.
an Azure Function app, and you guess, okay, it's fine. They're using serverless Azure Functions. They have in mind some kind of serverless first mindset, and then you go to the serverless the Azure Function app, and you see premium plan, and you think, oh god, so they pay 1,000 euros per month, and okay, wow. And then you think, okay, it's fine. Let's go to the request, and then you see, for example, 2,000 requests per month. And then I guess, okay, they pay more or less 1 euro per request. This is not a good solution, I would say. And in such a case, for me, it's always like, don't over provision. Start small. Think of what you really need, and maybe have some kind of plan B when plan A is working, or it's going further and it's gotten bigger, that you then exactly know what you need to do to get this new numbers as well. So basically start with a consumption plan, or I guess it's called flex consumption plan now. Azure introduced, it's in preview, but in general it's a better consumption plan. So it's an idea of pay as you go in an Azure function environment. And with this flex consumption plan, we have the advantages of VNet integration. I guess cold starts are more or less reduced. So I guess starting in an company or in an enterprise environment, starting with a flex consumption plan is, for me, I would say, the best starting point, because at the end, you can go to premium plans, whatever, after some time. Or you start with Azure Container Apps. So basically a Docker container which runs serverless pay as you go. And when you don't want to run it serverless, you can just use your own Kubernetes cluster. So this is as well a quite good solution.
Okay, brilliant. Just as this episode is coming to an end, is there any last minute like resources or tips you would recommend other people to learn or be aware of when want to learn more about availability and low latency?
At the end, Microsoft Architecture Center is a quite good learning platform, I would say, where you can see architecture styles and learn from them. I told you at the beginning, I used it sometime, but it's some time ago now as well. So, but honestly, this is a quite good solution to find different architecture styles, found solutions, and at the end, for sure, learn from these solutions for your own work. Basically, Azure Architecture Center, Azure Learn. Yeah.
So in a way, you need to keep monitor and know when to scale in order to minimize costs as well. Okay. So as is there any? Are you going to any events, tech events? So, Florian?
Yeah. Now in October, I don't have the correct numbers in mind. There is a serverless architecture conference in Berlin where I have a talk exactly about this topic, and with this presentation where I go deeper in the topic with Azure Fronto as well, Azure Functions, Cosmos DB, and make a small demo of how we can use this solution for high availability and low latency. And then there are a lot more conferences, I guess, for this year.
Where is okay? Is that in person? I take it that conference you're going to.
It's in person, yeah, right. Most of the
Okay,
time.
that's brilliant. When is it? Sorry.
End of October, I guess 23rd, 24th. I don't know exactly. End of
Nice.
October.
That's brilliant. Okay. So is there any last minute like tips that you want to advise people or resource that you want aside from Architecture Center? Or any tips that people want to be aware of when designing a high availability architect?
Oh, good question. Uh,
Any like challenges or any pointers would you recommend like someone
yeah,
that's
okay.
to be aware of? Whether it's like
Yeah,
some challenge that you made in your journey.
yeah. One big topic when you have low latency on your web page or web application, so this doesn't mean that your database is low latency. So when you make a high availability, low latency system, have a look to your database as well, because when you have your database only in one region, then yeah, it's nice that your web application is low latency, but when then the call is not from the customer goes to the web page, but from the web page to the servers going through the Atlantic Ocean, then you don't have win anything. So have in mind database is important as well. Yeah.
Okay, brilliant. Okay, so thanks for joining this episode, Florian. So in 3 weeks, you're going to be on uh, Apple Music, Spotify, and be live with social media. So thanks for joining this episode.
Thank
Bye.
you.